Hi everyone, bringing you a very exciting video about background images in HTML web pages. After hyperlinks, background images were the biggest craze in the web world at one time, but by the time I'm creating this video, the sensation has fizzled out a bit. But it does not mean background images have lost their importance. They're just not used as crazily as they once were. They can be creatively used to give an amazing visual appeal to your otherwise dull black and white web page, just like this slide. I must emphasize here that though they are called HTML background images, they are not exactly an HTML thing. They are more of a styling construct and more a part of CSS or cascading style sheets than HTML. They can be applied to entire web page or selective elements like page headers or a div. But important bit is they don't interfere with regular HTML flow or element placement or positioning. In fact, they are not even applied within HTML but are defined within styling attributes or CSS only. Background images can be applied and styled in a lot of ways. This video will cover most of the basic workflows and CSS properties available to manipulate background images in a variety of ways. We'll cover some advanced workflows like multiple background images handling in a separate video. We'll start from scratch, so even if you are new, you won't miss anything. But I am doing that with the expectation that my viewers will follow along and code with me. I'm Ali from Learn Awesome, and this video is part of our full stack web development series on the channel. We'll be using Visual Studio Code as our editor, and its setup with live preview has been explained in a previous video already. Let's start by heading over to Visual Studio Code and adding a new HTML file. I'm using a Windows machine, but you can follow along on any environment. So I'm going to create a new folder with the mkdir command and type in HTML background images. I'm going to step into this and type code dot, which is going to bring up Visual Studio Code with this folder in context. Here we are. Now let's create a new HTML file here called my background image document.html. And using the cool feature in Visual Studio Code, I'm going to type HTML and select the second entry from the list that pops up. And this is going to create a boilerplate HTML document for me. And I just need to rename it to and my web page is ready. Let's bring up the live preview as well so we can see what we are doing. And here it is. It's blank because there is nothing in here. Since we will need to use a lot of CSS, let's also add a CSS file in the same breath. So I'm going to give it the same name but with different extension, .css extension. Let's close this for now. So I'm going to link this CSS with my HTML using the link command, rel equal to style sheet and href equal to my background image document.css. All right, everything is set up correctly. Let's start adding some backgrounds. To do that, the first thing we need is backgrounds themselves. So let's head over to Microsoft Paint and you can choose a graphic editor of your choice on your environment and create two background images. So I will be creating two background images in an image folder, so which I am going to create now. And I'm going to call it BG small and BG large. The BG small would be 50 by 50 pixel. Large one would be 1024 by 768 pixels. We can use PNG or JPG formats. So I'm going to fast forward from here. You can follow along. Our setup is complete. So let's add our first background image in a tiled format to HTML document. And for this, we are going to use the small background image. So doing that is pretty simple. I'm just going to head over to my CSS file. And here I'm going to apply the background on my body element, which is going to cover the entire web page. And I'm going to say background image URL dot slash image slash pg small.png. Right, let's head back to our HTML file and open the live preview. And you can see a textured background has been applied already for the entire web page with just 3 lines of CSS code. Pretty cool, right? And do remember that background images, as the name suggests, are in the background. You can edit your HTML document normally. So let's try that by adding a heading element in the HTML. So let's say I add a h1 heading and call it my background page heading. See, the background is not getting in way of the HTML elements in any way. They just remain in the background just like a canvas and don't interfere with anything in the HTML flow. So you can create, edit all kind of HTML elements just like you would without a background. It would just be there doing nothing, just adding the visual appeal. Okay, let's get rid of this navigation pane for now so we can focus more on the elements, and let's discuss this background image CSS property a little bit more. So the entire magic that we saw is all thanks to this background image CSS property, which allows you to select a file on the disk using the URL CSS function. That function names takes the name of an image file to use as a background, and the background image property takes care of the rest, that is using the image to show the file as background and repeating it as necessary to fill the available space and whatnot. So note you can use relative as well as absolute paths in here. I use the relative path since the file was in my image folder, but you can give a full URL like http colon backslash some server.com slash pgsmall.jpg, and that would work quite as good. All right, so here we are using the external CSS file, but nothing stops you from applying this background on the body element directly as inline styles. So if you want, you can just go here and say style equal to background image, and in here you say URL and dot slash image slash pg small, and that would work quite as well. But I'm gonna remove that. Just wanted to show it to you, and I'm gonna restore this back. Okay, so the most striking feature of this background image that has been applied is the repetition. So you would notice that this is endlessly repeating in both the horizontal and vertical direction. So the CSS gives us quite a bit of control over this behavior. The default behavior is this, what you are seeing. The small background image would be tiled or repeated until it fills the entire available space. So this default behavior is known as tiling, but we can change that using another CSS property, which is our next topic, which is background repeat. And there are a bunch of available options given here. So we can start with this repeat one, which is the default value and is applied if you didn't specify a value explicitly. So right now this is being auto applied by the browser. With this value, the image is repeated in both horizontal and vertical direction. Next one is repeat X. So in this one, the background image is only repeated in horizontal or X direction. So if I select this, you can see only one row of our background image appeared, and it did not fill in the entire vertical space because repetition is only allowed in X direction. Similarly, if I just change it to Y, repeat Y, then it is only going to go in the vertical direction and not cover the horizontal direction. And last one is no repeat, which is going to stop this behavior completely, and background image is only going to be rendered once and not repeat at all. Right, so far the image that we chose is appearing in its default size, that is 50 by 50 pixels, that was saved on the disk. So while this is fine for tiling case, sometimes you want the background image to cover the elements in situations where browser may be resized or dimensions of viewport differ from that of the image. So you want some squish or stretch to happen. And for doing this, you have the background size property as a helpful aid. Let's explore the values. So I'm going to say background size, and the main three options are auto, contain, and cover. So auto is the default one, which is in place if not specified. So this is being applied right now. In this mode, the background image retains its original size, that is one it was saved with. and in our example, it's 50 by 50 pixels. Cover, on the other hand, cause the background image to resize and cover the entire element. So this can mean scaling up or scaling down the image depending on whether it is bigger or smaller than the element. Since we are playing with a small background image, it is stretched beyond recognition to cover the entire body. But if we use the big background image by using BG large, it's more pleasing to the eye, right? So do note that background repeat, if since we have used no repeat, so if I change it back to auto or remove it at all, then the background image would be scaled to fit the horizontal dimension only, and then it would repeat vertically. Do remember this part, horizontally and then vertically. So you saw that as soon as I changed it back to auto, or if I remove it entirely where auto is auto applied, the background image starts repeating in the vertical direction. Let me quickly show you with small as well, since that would make it more pronounced. So see, it's repeating in vertical direction only, filling in the entire horizontal space. Let me change back to large. And the next property value for background size we are going to cover is contain. And contain is interesting as it causes the image to fit the entire space within the element while maintaining the aspect ratio. This applies to large images only since small ones are already contained within the element. So as you can see, the image is not only contained, but it is being tiled as well. And it is no bigger in final effect than the small image. This is because our background repeat property is set by default to repeat value. This interferes with background size. So let's fix that by adding no repeat as background repeat value and give it a try. So I'm going to say background repeat to no repeat, and there's still no luck. Note that contain also takes into account the image aspect ratio and makes sure it is maintained. So if it is different from the viewport, the image would leave white space around it to maintain its original aspect ratio. This is one of the precondition of contains. So is contains really that bad and unresponsive? Then why use it at all? Well, it turns out it is behaving correctly, exactly as it should. The seemingly unexpected behavior is due to those cautious in legal documents or terms or conditions which you ignore but are important. So the problem here is contains try to fit the background image within the size of element it is applied to, not the viewport. In our case, the element is body, so the usual assumption is that body means the entire visible area of browser, but no, body element in this case is the entire width of the browser. But vertically, it's only as tall as the H1 heading itself. So let's try and add more headings or content to our body element and see if background image behaves any differently. So I'm going to copy paste this heading. And you would have noticed that with each new heading added to body element, the background image gets bigger and bigger. The effect would be even more pronounced if we use the BG small image. So let's give it a try. And now let me remove those headings. And you can see it's shrinking further and further because it is trying to fit the body element, which is ending right over here in this case, but stretches as we add more and more content to our body and its size increases. Hope you understand what the problem was. I can also demonstrate by adding a border to the body, 1px solid black, and you see the border around the body element since we are in the body CSS. So if I now remove these three headings, see, it shows you the extents of the body element, and you would see the image is trying to span the entire vertical width. And as we add more and more headings, the size increases, and so does the size of the image. All right, let's remove that for now. And let's go to our next topic, which is custom width and height of background images. So contain and cover or auto for background size are auto values, but you can exercise more precise control even in pixels or percentages for to control the size of the image. So let me introduce background size as 100 pixel by 200 pixel, right? So now you can see the background image is twice as high as it is wide, and you can play around with these values. So if I change it to 50 pixels, you see it gets squished. So you can exercise very precise control over the size of the background image. So if I do this, you see squished images appearing all over. But if I do this, the small image gets stretched to the dimensions that you specified. Okay, pixel is not just the only unit of measure used in CSS. We also have some interesting ones, which I'm going to introduce now, and these are M and rem. So note that one M is equal to font size on the current element or its parent. So the size of one M would make the background image appear exactly in height to say a letter, let's say capital A. So let's go ahead and try it to make it more to make more sense. So 1M, and let's see. So you see the size of the background image shrunk to a very small degree, and these can be compared because heading has a bloated size. So let's introduce some normal text. So quick brown fox. So yeah, there's a problem. The capital A and the star sign don't align exactly, so we can't see the difference, and that is because the body element has kind of a margin from the corners. And what a margin is the gap between an element and its surrounding. So browsers automatically add some margin to for the body element, so they don't so there's a gap between the body element and the corners of the browser. So to remove that, I'm going to say margin 0 pixel, and that is going to bring the text right at the corner. And now you can see the height of capital A is approximately same as the star of the background image. So this is what the 1M size is. There's also another related property called rem. And M and rem differ in the sense that M is the font size on current or its parent element, while rem is always relative to font size applied on top level HTML element or default font size for the browser. So we can change font sizes for several elements in our CSS. So if you want to just make your background image or any other element sized relative to the default font size or the root level font size, you can use rem instead. All right, there's one more unit of measurement which is even more interesting, and that is the percentage. So I'm going to get rid of this margin 0 pixels, and I'm going to say 50%, 50%. Okay, and you saw that it immediately increase the size of the background image quite a bit. I'm also going to say background repeat to no repeat, so we can see it more precisely. So you can see with 50% background size, the background image is taking exactly half the space of the HTML element. So we can compare that with 100% to properly see the difference. So if I change both of these to 100%, you see the background image is stretched to fit the entire body element. Kind of, there was some gap in above and below in the image itself. So what if I say VG large? And you would see it is fitting exactly the entire body element in our web page. So percentages are awesome in the sense that they are responsive. They make the background image really responsive. So to see that in action, I'm going to save both documents, reveal it in File Explorer, and bring it here. So now here you can see the background image is 50% of the body element, and if I change the size of the browser, the background image responds and stays at 50% of the browser width as well. And remember that body element takes the entire width of the browser, and height is determined by its content. So you can see the background image is responding properly according to that. And if I increase the content, background image is gonna get taller as well. All right, that is enough about the sizing. So next, let's talk about the position of background image. So we can control where the background image appears using the position property. So we have the option of using one of the built-in auto values like left, right, center, or be more precise like values in pixels or percentages like size. So let's give it a try. So I'm gonna get rid of this and I'm going to introduce background position. And I'm going to say center here. Okay, so our background image has been rendered position centered center. And note that background position has two values, one to control the horizontal positioning and the other one for vertical positioning. So the possible default values are left, center, and right for horizontal, and top, center, and bottom for vertical positioning. And you can use combination of these to position the background in all 9 positions. This, and this. In fact, it's not that obvious from the large image, so let me change it to the small one to make it more prominent, right? So it's appearing dead in the center. But in addition to these built-in values, the one I talked about, like left, top, center, etc., we also have the option of using percentages and absolute unit of measures like pixels. So for example, if you would like this background to appear 50 pixels from the left, I'm going to say 50 pixel for the horizontal measure and center for the vertical one. And and you see it is appearing exactly where we wanted it to, 50 pixels from the left and exactly in the center of the body element. So same goes for percentages. So if you want star to appear 25% from the bottom of the body element, so I would use 75%. Sorry, I would use 75% for the second value. So it is now 25% from the bottom and 75% from the top vertically and 50 pixels from the left. So next up, we have another concept of background images called background attachment that determines how attached a background image is to the HTML document or web page. In other words, it determines if background image is going to stick around as you scroll or scroll with rest of the content. So let's take it for a spin to get more sense out of these abstract descriptions. So I'm going to add a background attachment property here, and you can see it has three main values: fixed, local, and scroll. So scroll is the default value and behavior you have been seen so far. In this mode, the background image scrolls along with the rest of the content or content of the element. So as you scroll the page, the background image moves with rest of the content. In fixed mode, the background image gets attached or stuck to the viewport at the original position. So as you scroll the page, the background image holds ground and does not move along with the rest of the content. Since the effect can only be observed with a scrollable body element, you either need to add a lot of content to body element, which we are using as our example, like copy paste contents multiple times, or use height colon 2000 pixels to add sufficient scrolling area for the body element. So let's use the fixed value in our example and see what happens. So did you notice that as I added background attachment fixed line, the background image position changed from within the content to near bottom left of the browser window? Let's have a look again. So if I remove this, it was originally here, but if I change it, it moves up. So what is happening is the element is shifting from 75% of the body element height to 75% of the current viewport or viewable area of browser. this entire area. Now, if we scroll using mouse or keypad, you will notice the background image remains in place while rest of the content scrolls above it. This is an extremely powerful concept applicable in a lot of situations. All right, the third property is local. So to understand local, we first need to understand why it is even required. No amount of words would convey the idea without watching it first. So let's quickly add a div element first to the body and add its own background specific to div element itself. So I'm going to get rid of most of these and introduce a div element. And in here, I'm going to add some dummy text from lipsum.com that we used in our anchor in our hyperlinks example video. So here we go. And in our CSS file, we are going to introduce styling for the div element. And I'm going to say background image to be URL slash pg small. And I'm going to say overflow auto, which is going to introduce scroll bar as needed. And I'm going to say height of this div is 150 pixels. Okay, so I'm making it smaller than the content it contains to enforce a scroll bar appearing for the div element. All right, why is this appearing? Right? So if you're following along, you must make sure the scroll bar appears on the div. Now, first we are going to scroll the page. Wait a second. So first I'm going to scroll the page itself and we can see the fixed image is sticking to its position. And now I'm going to scroll the div scroll bar. And we can see that the behavior is the same. That is, the background image in div is behaving exactly like the fixed background image in our body element. So this is not something you expected it to do, right? We are used to background scrolling with the content. So be it web page itself or the element. So to counter that behavior, we have local to the rescue. So if I introduce background attachment local, and now we see that this time the background is moving with the contents as expected. So since this is an introductory video, I'm not going to delve into the details of why this behavior happens, but if you see this behavior, you know how to counteract that. So I understand this video has gone longer than I expected, but trust me, we are nearing the end. So for our next topic, we are going to see how to control the origin or starting position of the background image. And to do that, we first need to understand some basic concepts about CSS. So I'm going to bring up the Chrome browser and use an inspect feature and have a look at this box shown over here. So by default, the CSS uses what we call a box CSS model, and any HTML element in default box CSS model is comprised of several layers of boxes, and you can control which of these boxes is spanned by the background image. As you can see, this is a representation of these boxed layers. So the content is contained in this blue area, and then there's padding, which is the gap between the content and the border of the element, and then it is followed by the border itself, and then the element and its surrounding elements have a gap which is called margin. So any HTML element has these margin, border, and padding boxes enclosing its contents in the middle, right? So we can control whether background image would be restricted to the content area or inside the border or outside the content area bleeding into the padding area. Again, emphasizing the padding is the gap between the border and the content itself. So let's quickly give it a try and
To do that, let's go back to Visual Studio Code and change the div CSS from our previous example like this. So I'm going to use the background origin property this time, and I'm going to say padding box. And this time I'm going to use the large image to show you what it means. And since it's going beyond, it's bigger than the element itself, I'm going to use background size to be cover. Okay, since we cannot see the border, so we can't tell whether it is only spanning the content area or the padding area. So let me mark the border by using the border property, and I'm going to say its border is 10 pixels dashed and black. Right? I use dashed because we want to see if it bleeds into the border itself, right? Similarly, see the padding, when remember this padding was this green area, so I'm going to mark the padding as well. So I'm going to say padding is 20 pixels. We use the dashed border to see background if the background image bleeds into the border with changing values. So now and we see that it did not. So now we can play around with the values for this background origin, and the prominent ones are content box, padding box, and border box. So let's start with the content box. It's not behaving as I expected. Oh, because it is being repeated. So let me also do background repeat to no repeat. And yes, this time you can see that the border only spanned the content portion and left the padding portion and the border portion untouched. So if I go ahead and change it back to padding box, now you see that it is spanning the padding area which lies outside the content area of the element itself. So it's filling the gap between content and the border. And there is this third property available for border box. So if I use that, it should bleed into the border itself, which is clearly not happening. And that's probably because of this overflow auto being used. So if I get rid of this, you can see it seeped inside the gaps of the border. So, all right, so if we use these padding boxes or others, or let's say content box, which would make it more prominent, you would notice that the image started from the content area, but it is seeping in the border and padding area at the bottom, right? Which is something we might want to avoid. So the problem is the background origin only controls where the background image is starting from, not where it is ending. So to control the ending or the bottom right portion, we also need to introduce another property, which is background clip. And background clip specifies where the background image must end. So if I also specify content box here, now the background image is only spanning the content area. So if I introduce overflow auto again, you would notice it's no longer spanning into the border area. And if I scroll all the way to the bottom, you see that the padding area at the bottom of the content is left untouched. Right, this finally brings us to the end of this extensive coverage of background images. Believe it or not, this was the basic coverage, and we would have a follow-up video to go over some advanced techniques with background images. But for now, this was more than enough. If you liked, please like and share this video, and you can consider subscribing to the channel itself. And don't forget to check out other videos in our yet another full stack development course playlist. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.